Welcome, friends. This is our Wednesday meditation and talk, and we're being webcasted on my YouTube and Facebook pages and IMCWs as well. We begin with a meditation, and as a way of arriving, you might find the posture that most supports you, and then make whatever subtle adjustments help you to really feel right here, awake and at ease. In the silence and the stillness, let your awareness sweep through your body and just notice if there's any obvious areas of tightness, of tension. Just sense what wants to let go a little right now. You might sense a little bit of a loosening, softening around the shoulders. Perhaps a melting or dissolving sensation inside the shoulders. And perhaps a softening of the hands. And let there be an openness to the chest. Maybe a softening at the belly. Relaxing through the pelvic region. Aware of the places of contact where your hands touch each other, or the thighs, the legs, where your bottom touches the cushion or the chair, feet touching the floor. Just aware of the sense of pressure and warmth. And if you could feel your whole body from the inside out, just sensing the tingling and the vibrating, the heat or the cool, this whole play of sensation. Including sound in your awareness. Close-in sounds in the room. The appearing and the disappearing of these words. And the spaces between sounds. Listening to the more distant sounds. Listening not just with your ears, but with your whole awareness. Just letting sounds wash through. Noticing with listening that there's nothing to do. Sounds appear and are known spontaneously by awareness. Sense the edgeless space that all sounds are appearing in. Just relaxing into that openness that's listening. totally receptive. There's a listening to and a feeling of the whole changing flow, moment to moment. It's quite natural for the attention to contract and go inside of thoughts. So you forget the awareness that's listening. And when that happens, when you notice thinking, not a problem, just to recognize, oh, okay, inside a virtual reality. And then pause and reopen the attention. And begin listening again to the sounds that are actually here, instead of the thoughts in the mind. Listening with your whole awareness. You can begin fresh in any moment. Just simply noticing where the attention is and choosing to arrive again. Bringing that friendliness and interest right back here. Opening the attention to listen to the sounds that are appearing. In these last few moments, bringing that listening and receptive attention to the heart. Just listening to your own heart. Sensing the state of your heart in this moment. Offering whatever prayer or blessing, wish of well-being to your own heart, whatever most resonates in this moment. Bringing to mind a dear one, so that you're listening to and feeling that person, that being, their energy. And offering whatever prayer, whatever wish or blessing resonates. And then sensing the heart space that holds all beings, so that you're listening to the lives, consciousness and beings everywhere. Offering your prayer. You might gently bring yourselves back by taking a few long, deep breaths, moving around a bit, and when you're ready, opening your eyes if the eyes are closed. And I'll offer some announcements of upcoming events. Let's see, we begin by saying, check my website, tarabrach.com. There's new things all the time, really, and mostly virtual offerings and also so many resources. So please do visit us. Also checking out imcw.org for live stream offerings from local DC area teachers. And the upcoming Affinity Sanghas of this week are for women, young adults, Teens of Color Mindfulness Group, Mighty Real, Living Mindfully with Illness Together, and the LGBTQIA SIT. Each week after this talk ends, you are invited to join a community dialogue where we break into small groups and you can discuss what comes up for you around mindfulness and daily living. It's really a lovely way to meet people and deepen practice. And the call-in information is tarabrach.com/class. Many of you know the teachings are offered freely here. Your donations make a huge difference, so thank you for them. Offer what you can afford. If you know, many people offer $10, some offer less, some offer more, and just know that whatever you offer is truly appreciated. And the links can be found in the description. Okay, we'll take a few moments to pause and then move into this week's talk. Namaste, welcome friends. I hope you're entering the new year in good spirits.
So lovely to be with you, Tara.
Really good to have you, Roland. And I'm going to do a little bit of an intro of who you are so people know a bit more. And then I have so many questions to ask you. So Roland Griffiths is most known probably as a scientist, researcher, and professor at Johns Hopkins. And he's a leader in clinical research and psychedelic use for those with cancer, those struggling with addiction, with depression, actually a number of domains, and really is responsible for this renaissance, this resurgence of interest in this domain. Roland's a dedicated long-term meditator, many decades. And in his personal life, he's had a recent diagnosis of incurable cancer. So he's facing his own mortality. So we'll be talking about all of this, including a very exciting endowment funding psychedelic research program focused on spirituality and well-being in healthy people, which to me has huge implications and promise for our world. And the last thing I'd like to say is we first met 10 years ago, just looked it up. And Roland was doing a study, the effect of psychedelics on experienced practitioners, meditators. And I was sharing the word with other people I knew. And I went up myself to Hopkins to apply to be in it. I didn't fit the criteria due to a medication I was on, but my husband, Jonathan, participated. But during that visit to Hopkins, that's when I first met Roland, and I was immediately struck by just deeply wise, present, accessible, kind human, you know. And in time, I learned more. Roland participated in one of the local retreats we were leading, and I got to know him more socially, met his now wife, Marla. And just to say, Roland is a true inspiration for me in many ways. So I feel really, really grateful to have him join us. And now I'll speak to you, Roland, to have you join us. So again, thank you so much for your willingness.
Thank you, Tara, and right back at you. I felt a connection from day one when we met, and Marlon and I have so appreciated. We've done two retreats now.
Oh, it's two.
With
Okay.
you, yeah, and both of which were really lovely. So it's wonderful to join you.
Yeah. So since we started talking about retreats, maybe just to begin and share with us what drew you to meditation, what kind of meditation, what you're practicing now, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I grew up without any religious training or background to speak of. I flunked out of confirmation class in the sixth grade. I became curious about meditation in graduate school when I was at the University of Minnesota. This would have been about 1971. And a local meditation teacher out of Swami Rama's tradition was there. And I was intrigued by this idea that this methodology, meditation, had been developed over thousands of years to explore inner experience. And I recognized and was deeply curious about that, although I had no training. And a matter of fact, my graduate school training was pretty antithetical to that, because I was trained in experimental analysis of behavior, Skinnerian approach that really puts emphasis on behavioral output and has a jaded understanding or jaded view of what is accessible from interior space. But long story short, I did, as so many people do, I think, on first encountering meditation, is I tried it, and 3 minutes seemed like 3 hours, and I could not. I just didn't get it, and nothing lit up for me, and so it dropped out. And it was only 25 years later that a good friend of mine got involved initially with Siddha Yoga here in Baltimore, and I became once again curious about it, and I can't explain why it was different, but in this case it was, and there was something intriguing and something that opened up to me about meditation practice. Now, I became deeply curious about meditation. I actually considered at one point dropping out. At that point, I was a full professor with an international reputation in clinical pharmacology, mostly drugs of abuse. And I considered dropping out altogether of the university and going off to the ashram in India. I started reading a lot about different meditation traditions, started reading about religious traditions, and just became deeply curious about what that was about. And at the point where I was seriously considering stepping away from university, someone brought my attention to psychedelics, and I had had some, what I'd have to describe as trivial experiences back in college with psychedelics, none of them meaningful. And so I wasn't pulled toward them, but it got me to reread that literature and being curious about the nature of opening experiences. I thought, well, gee, maybe this is an opportunity to combine my training and my expertise in clinical trials and psychopharmacology with what I'm now very committed to exploring. And that's my own personal unfolding of this path forward, exploring the nature of mind and the nature of self, and with my professional expertise. And so that brought us into the study of psilocybin. We initiated at the time the first study to administer a high dose of a psychedelic, in this case psilocybin, to healthy volunteers who were psychedelic naive, and the results were beyond anything that I might have imagined in terms of being these dramatic, pivotal experiences. They're opening experiences. They're awakening, classic awakening experiences that people attribute long-lasting positive changes in moods and attitudes and behavior months or years afterwards. And having worked with many drugs of abuse and mood-altering drugs at that point, I kind of immediately recognized, one, how unusual that effect is. There's no other drug class that provokes these kinds of experiences to which people attribute these enduring long-term positive changes. And two, the convergence of the nature, some of the phenomenology of that experience with opening experiences, generally mystical type experiences that have been reported within meditation traditions and within religious traditions for thousands of years.
So let me just ask you a question about that, because I kind of want to drop into that a little more, which is, you said you were having opening experiences that got you so curious, you almost dropped out to, pursue them. What for you was an opening experience like? Can you describe it in a way so I'd know what it was like for you when you had those initial opening experiences in meditation?
Something started happening in meditation. There was an opening up and a curiosity about interiority that had not been there before. And so up to that point, I think I was virtually completely identified with the voice in my head. The narrative structure of who I thought I was limited to that voice in the head that greets you in the morning and said, okay, what are we doing today? Let's look at the to-do list. And so there was a sense that there's something beyond that, and there's a field of mind, the nature of mind, that I just was largely ignorant of. And there's just a much larger context to the field of consciousness, the background, foreground sort of thing. When one's identified with that voice in the head or the immediate objects of consciousness, and kind of losing the fact that those are appearing in this much larger field of consciousness.
And would you say, and I'm tracking you, that it's kind of the difference between living inside a story, you're living inside a narrative, and opening up beyond the narrative so you can see the thoughts in your mind, but you realize that what you are is larger than the thoughts. You sense that you are part of, or your consciousness is a field that's bigger than the thoughts and the ideas.
Yeah. And in classic meditation, instruction, think of the thoughts as, clouds passing in the sky. But what you're looking for is that background. Now, that was accompanied by, so this expanded consciousness, if you will, and accompanied by, let's see, a sense of not only wonder and truth. There's something really important and true about these experiences, but there was also a sense of joy that came up, the Ananda part of it. And at that point, I had not studied classic mystical experiences, which I now have. I have some understanding of what at least I think are the important components of these opening experiences. I didn't have that as a template to put on that. But if I kind of reflect on it, classically, those opening experiences, as I now understand them, are comprised of this sense of the interconnectedness of all things, a sense of unity. And that can be both a total void and it can be a total fullness. And I certainly had that kind of experience. There's something about that background that can be devoid of objects of consciousness. And then that sense of the truth value. There was something important and interesting about this. And then there was this joy that came out of those experiences. And the other components of it is a sense of timelessness and spacelessness, which come out in the ineffable quality that you can't put it into words. So there were many of the features of the classic mystical experience, but I can't say that there was one time where I sat down in meditation. And then I'd gotten very serious about meditation. I was doing, I was meditating 2+ hours a day. I was going on retreats. I was doing intensive meditation and reflection within the Siddha Yoga tradition, and also with attendant readings or scriptural readings. But there was something deeply important about that investigation for me.
And then you did shift to Vipassana. So I'm curious what ended up drawing you to Vipassana.
Yeah. So after the psychedelic work started going on, and I think one thing I wanted to say is that I went in to the research with psychedelics with a good bit of skepticism, because what I thought is I had the authentic coin of the realm here with meditation, and I looked at some of these psychedelic proponents and felt quite skeptical about it, and they did not present in a way that I would think that one who might be close to enlightenment, whatever that means, they didn't look like that. And I was suspicious about kind of the zeal and the over enthusiasm. But the results of the study were just so remarkable to me that it just drew me in, and that's been a real focus of my research ever since. But I was actually quite reluctant to try psychedelics myself because, one, I thought it might skew my ability to do empirical research, and two, I thought there was a huge risk to the field if I were identified as a user, as a proponent, which I guess I might consider myself to be one now, and many years after we started this research, I finally waded back in to some limited psychedelic use, and so I can affirm that relationship. Let's see. So, what got me involved with Vipassana? I started doing retreats at IMS in Barrie. I think as my practice deepened, there's some elegance about focusing on the nature of mind and not grasping for experiences that I thought was of deep value. And of course, meditation is complex, and there's so many different forms of it. I also think scientifically, the neutrality that I experience with at least the U.S. Vipassana teachers is, agnostic to mechanisms, supernatural or otherwise, that are kind of forefronted in some of these other traditions. And so I'm bred as a scientist, a skeptic, albeit a curious one, but I can't embrace or accept beliefs based on authority. And there's so much of what goes on in some traditions that really makes that a requirement. So yeah, I felt more home in
Mhm.
Buddhism as a tradition, but I do value the experiential components of what can emerge, um, and the different traditions are teach differently about that.
So what I'd like to hear from you then, because you've continued with Vipassana, your mind's continued to bring that curiosity and have openings in your own way. And how has that interweaved with your psychedelic use? And now I'm talking personally, how the openings from meditation and the openings from the psychedelics have corresponded, reinforced, whatever you've discovered on that.
Yeah. So I found meditation to be this really valuable approach to understanding the nature of mind, at least as that's how I'm experiencing it. And there is this sense, as we've been talking about, this the background sense of awareness with objects emerging within the field of consciousness, and the deep teaching about not to become attached to those objects, that you have a freedom within the landscape of mind to choose whether or not to be involved, and to catch yourself uh, when you can about not getting just pulled off in a direction. And so that started meshing with the psychedelics, because these experiences are, at least now, the way we give psychedelics in the research setting is focused on introvertive experiences. So we give high doses of, and the compound we've worked most with is psilocybin, to people who are prepared. They're in the presence of two sitters or guides or therapists. And they're using eye shades and headphones. So we're asking them to direct their attention inward. And that's only one form of immersion experience. You can have extrovertive experiences as well, but for experimental reasons, we have focused on this introvertive experience and in a container. But the instruction to people who have had no prior meditation experience and are so attached to their narrative, essentially the instructions we give amount to, I think, a crash course in mindfulness.
That's so
Prior.
interesting.
So what we tell people is, you're going to have this experience. It may or may not be pleasant. It can take all kinds of shapes and forms. There may be visualizations, there may not be. And all we want you to do is pay attention to that experience, be present with it. We're here to support you should you start feeling uncomfortable, but we're going to continue to ask you to go back in. And then we forewarn people about these experiences can be very, very difficult. And we'll give a metaphor. We'll say, so for instance, with psilocybin, you can get a lot of visualizations. And so as a thought experiment, let's suppose a demonic figure appears within your consciousness. And this is something more terrifying than you can imagine. It's made by you for you. And your natural impulse is going to be to run or to fight it. And you want to do neither of those two. You want to just recognize it as an object of consciousness. And so the instruction is to be present with it, and actually not running, not fighting, but to approach it with this kind of deep curiosity. And in some cases, although I hesitate to do it, you can ask it what it's doing there, what it has to tell you, but that's reifying it. And that's actually what you ultimately you don't want to do. And then we'll say, as you approach it, whatever fear you have may be initially intensified, but you just want to stay with that. And the guarantee is that it's going to change. It's not going to be stable. And at some point it might, it might dissolve, it might become disgusting, it might become beautiful, it might become transcendent, but it will change. And that sounds to me like meditation 101, right? About just being present with whatever it is, until you actually can see it's appearing in this larger background.
I am fascinated by the instructions for being with the effects of a psychedelic are exactly the same instructions that we give being with whatever of the challenges that come up, that if we can notice them and not react, but rather just let them be in some way, have that curiosity. I always add a kind quality of attention if possible. They change. And not only do they change, but there becomes more familiarity with that changeless background, which is more the truth of who you are than the changing objects.
Yeah. No, exactly right. So I've sometimes described psychedelic experiences like meditation on steroids. I mean,
right.
It's empowered, and the objects of consciousness come up in many cases much more forcefully than they do in meditation, because meditation you can kick out of that pretty easily. With psychedelics, not so much, and people can really go down rabbit holes of misery, and if they really get caught there, that becomes kind of a classic bad experience, and people can be harmed by those experiences, well, as they can be with meditation experiences as well. But I think there's something empowered about that. So one of the interesting therapeutic effects then of the psychedelics is that people have these intense experiences in which they have stayed with the experience, and we're providing them the support to do that. I mean, people who get very uncomfortable, they want to take their eye shades off, they want to take their hair, they want to start talking, and we'll do that a little bit, and then we'll encourage it's time to go back in, and we think that's the important thing. Once people come out of that kind of experience, and that doesn't have to, each psychedelic experience does not have to involve that, but if it does, people often come out empowered in a way that they didn't believe possible before. I mean, they literally have been walking on the razor's edge between insanity or this abyss of fear, and something else that's real and it's present. And so they can come out empowered then in a way to tolerate suffering and not to escape difficult experiences in the way that they never believed possible before. And I think that has to do with the potential immediate therapeutic effects that some people feel. I mean, if they have identified themselves as being an addicted cigarette smoker, well, if you have that identity, that's exactly who you are. So you have to break that identity. And when they recognize that what it would take to break that identity, just like approaching the monster, is to put up with some discomfort. They're going to crave, but they then may recognize that craving or discomfort is time limited. It's not there forever, and they come out with this ability to tolerate suffering, to make choices going forward in their lives that they haven't been able to, because they're so identified with whatever it is, the pain or the, the craving or depression. And so we think that's operational in a variety of treatment contexts, and may account for why there's this transdiagnostic efficacy or generality to the power of those. Because once you recognize that you have that agency and the curiosity, then you're empowered to change things dramatically going forward. You change the narrative structure about how you hold yourself, how you view yourself in the world, and that can be hugely therapeutic.
And again, it's parallel totally with meditation, because even though it's not as intense, perhaps, every time you stay with something, you're no longer as much a victim of that thing. You are the awareness that's staying with, and there's a lot more freedom and choice. That's the confidence or empowerment, and they're very parallel. And I'm interested in, Roland, because we're talking about the parallels, the way these meditation and psychedelics really reinforce each other. And you have seen so many people go through this and dramatically transformed with depression, with addiction, with anxiety. Can you say a little more about the benefits people experience? I mean, you've named now that empowerment. I can get through this. What else have you noticed in people that have gone through these experiences?
Let's see. So there can be these classic mystical type experiences, and what I would say is that those emerge in meditation as well, and so that's kind of a resetting of a sense of self and a different worldview. The other piece of those experiences is this profound sense of the interconnectedness of all things, and so that comes along with it. There are also experiences of just personal insight, psychological insight. And those occur in meditation as well. It's almost like when you try to stop thinking about it and just let wisdom bubble up, it indeed does. I think within those experiences, and I guess we've been talking about it, there's just this sense that there's something much deeper, alive, to be explored about the nature of being. There is, at least for me, a sense of benevolence within this larger story of being. There's there's meaning and purpose that can emerge from these experiences, deeper appreciation for beauty and for love. There's there's so many different components to it.
I mean, they are all flavors of what you're describing, which is a profound shift in identity.
Yeah.
That if you're resting in a small self, there's always fear and defendedness and a sense of something around the corner is going to take me out.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of a profound shift when you feel identify with something larger. And I think I'm just like to share a little personally that your sequence of meditating, being very, very deep into meditation, and then re-encountering psychedelics in a meaningful way. Mine was the reverse, which is true for a lot of people, where in at the end of high school and in college, I began exploring with psilocybin and mescaline and so on. Not a whole lot, but enough so it was a radical exposure or revelation of a much more large mysterious, precious, interconnected universe than I had touched before. And it was so visceral to me that this entire universe, all forms are the same living energy, and it's all sentient. And I was not better or worse than anything else. I was just belonged. And, that dramatically affected my worldview. And it's what made me decide to stop using psychedelics and to join an ashram and spiritual community and really center meditation for my life.
Mhm.
So I mean, I remember the first time I had a psilocybin trip, I ended up making a clay Buddha. I was like molding clay, and it was pretty clear that, just not, I didn't need to use the chemicals and to go on a path of meditation. But I also want to add that I did have revisited in recent years, and the synergy is powerful and valuable too. So we can talk about that more, but um, I love what you're describing as the shifts that people experience and how much what happened in meditation. And I would even add that without meditation, they don't become as well integrated into really the full expression of your life. That meditation's what really, in a daily way, brings it all alive.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. So because of my interest in meditation, we have done therapeutic studies, but we've also done studies in beginning meditators and long-term
Mm,
meditators. And we've just actually completed another study in religious clergy. But with respect to meditation, uh, well, I think maybe the long-term meditators are the most interesting group. So what we did is recruit in people who had long-term histories of practice, tens of thousands of hours, done lots of retreat experiences, either had no psychedelic experiences, or had they had an experience that was 20 or 30 years ago, so they weren't present users. And there's such a prohibition within some Buddhist communities, with the fifth precept, that just makes that uh, taboo to use a psychoactive drug. But as we know, there are different interpretations of that. So they came in being curious about psychedelics, not having used it. And my sense of that was that they were hugely advantaged, not everybody, but most were hugely advantaged by that history of meditation practice, because they were comfortable at examining the nature of mind. So they could navigate these experiences more gracefully than many people who come in and never have had that kind of experience. We haven't actually published the results, but just to give a just brief synopsis is that most of those people, I hesitate to say virtually all, because there may be a few that didn't, but they really valued the experience with psychedelics. It added something new, and essentially deepened their commitment to meditation. No one came out of that experience saying, "Oh, yeah, psychedelics are the path." If anything, they embraced more fully their meditation practice. In many cases, it jolted people out of a habitual practice that they had gotten into. They had come to a go-to practice of meditation on breath or visualization, or whatever out of their tradition, and recognizing that the field to be explored is much greater than they had imagined. But if anything, it brought in more enthusiasm for their practice and more respect for their practice, because my view is that the only way to achieve stability in this investigation of the nature of mind is through practices such as meditation or other embodied practices. And psychedelics can be misleading and certainly don't, and in my judgment, represent a path in and of themselves, because there's no stability in it. And then certainly some people can get caught in the grasping for the experience, and that's could, derail them. And then there are certainly more risks involved in use of psychedelics than there are in meditation. But I see them as just very close cousins, and I've actually come to think that there really may be value, and we can't do that right now because of legality, or that's certainly discouraging. But there really may be value in much better investigation of how psychedelics can facilitate the exploration of the nature of mind when put into context of meditation. And I think, if I had my preferences now for preparing people for a psychedelic experience, it would be to have them do some very significant mindfulness practice prior to ever going in there, because they're going to be advantaged by that. And I think they're going to get a lot more out of that.
I'm with you completely, which makes me wonder, how much communication is there between the contemplative traditions and, the research that's now going on psychedelics? I mean, how much exploration is there on how to weave them in a meaningful way as part of what people are invited into?
Well, so you certainly know part of the story. When we started recruiting volunteers for the long-term meditation study, we approached a whole number of meditation teachers, and I don't know what percentage, but at least 50% said no, that's against our religion. There's no place for psychedelics. So it was really a firm stop. And what I would say is some of the teachers, particularly out of the IMS Vipassana tradition, were much more open and welcoming to that discussion, and thought that there was some value in proceeding. My guess is that that's going to change in time. I mean,
It's already changing.
well, you would know better than I.
Yeah, this is it's just huge, huge interest. And I think it's because of what you've pointed to, that it's not looked at like you're doing some recreational drug to get away from your troubles. It's looked at as a very wholesome way of deepening your experience of reality, if it's done with the proper setting. If your intention is to awaken, it serves awakening.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not for everybody, because I'd like you to address this. There are certain people that it's just not a fit for because of different types of emotional instability. I think you've named bipolar and psychosis as two that would exclude people.
So there are a couple of significant risks that can come out of psychedelic exposure. And first and foremost is that people under unsupervised conditions, unscreened conditions, can just engage in dangerous behavior, and they can get disoriented, they can get panicked, they can be confused to the point that they do themselves or others significant harm. And so these have to occur under conditions that discourage that. But apart from that, there are biological predispositions that would seem to be very unfavorable. And so we historically have excluded people with any family history of psychotic disorder, like schizophrenia. And the concern there, although there's no control study that proves this, but the concern there is that some people who are vulnerable to schizophrenia just may get pushed over the edge with that. And I think that can happen in intense meditation practice too.
I do too.
So I think it's a dramatic when it occurs with a psychedelic, and I think that it represents a real risk. There's no coming back from schizophrenia. I mean, that's a lifelong diagnosis as far as I know, and so that's a terrible outcome. There is concern in bipolar patients, particularly those that have manic manifestation, that psychedelics can trigger manic episodes, and then along with all the problems that can occur along with that. However, that's now coming under experimental investigation. There's just recently been published a study looking at the non-manic variant of bipolar, and that appeared to be, and this is just very pilot work, but it appeared to be treated effectively, the depression treated effectively with psilocybin. So a bar completely against bipolar may not be warranted, but these investigations still need to go on.
Can you give us just a brief bit of the science, that the common pathways that thus far it's thought between how psychedelics work in the brain and how meditation works in the brain? Like, how do they both have the effects they have of giving us that enlarged sense of being?
Well, so one answer to that is our understanding of that is truly primitive. So the neuroscience of understanding how these experiences unfold with both psychedelics and in meditation is exciting. There's a lot of research going on, but again, it's at its infancy. So we do understand something about molecular sites of action with the psychedelics. We understand what pathways, what neurological pathways are triggered with that. We know from imaging studies what areas of brain increase or decrease in activity after a psychedelic. We know something about the connectivity that goes on between different regions of brain. And there's been a lot of interest in looking at some of those network functions. And one of the most intriguing things that bring meditation and psychedelics together is the observation that acute psychedelics produce a decrease in functioning of something called the default mode network. So there are many networks in brain that underlie and subserve different kinds of functions, brain functions. And this default mode network is one that was discovered when they asked people just to sit alone in the scanner and do nothing. And of course, there is no such thing as doing nothing. And that's the default mode network. It comes online. It's thought to be associated with self-referential processing, kind of perseverative thoughts about oneself. And that is decreased when a psychedelic is given. And that intuitively makes some sense because someone's drawn into the present moment. That discursive voice is largely turned off. And the interesting thing with meditation, and this came out of Judd Brewer's initial observation in long-term meditators, is that's exactly what happens in long-term meditators. There's a decrease in this self-referential processing, this default mode network activity. But it's much more complex than that. And and we have a variety of other ideas of different networks that may be at play with psychedelics, and surely must be at play with meditation. So I think the thing that I fall back on is how little we understand about what's going on in the brain. I mean, these network functions, we have billions of connections there. And this is just a very crude understanding of what kinds of brain activities might be at play here. There is something called the hard problem of consciousness, and that is consciousness ever going to be explicable from a purely reductionistic and materialistic view? And we don't know the answer to that. And many people within my field of neuroscience would take it as a given that it has to be that way. But it doesn't. And we don't know. We need to be humble about that. So there are these deeply intriguing questions about, what this whole process is about. And we don't have a coherent physics. Quantum theory hasn't been reconciled with conventional physics. So there's so much that we don't understand. So at the bottom line, there's a sense that we need to be very humble about what we do and don't know. But my thought would be, surely there's much more to learn about this integration and the similar and differences between psychedelics and meditation. And so that's a huge opportunity for future research.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating one. I mean, even if everything can't be reduced, there's going to be some expressions of pathways that are going to be in common or not.
Yes.
And the fact that the one that's been identified thus far as possibly correlating has to do with a decrease in centralizing a sense of a self certainly makes intuitive sense.
Yes. Yeah.
That as they say, no self, no problem. It's like the less we're identified and centering throughout the day, what's happening to me, what's going to go wrong for me, the more we are taking in our world. And so there is a bit of freedom with that one.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you have noticed and what people have reported, but maybe I'll ask you personally, has been in the impact on relationships with others that follow these experiences. Did you notice in your own life a shift that was very pronounced in how you were relating to others as meditation and psychedelics deepen their impact?
Yeah. So let's see. So one thing I should say is that because we have run our studies in participants one at a time, they're disadvantaged by really not having a group to share their experience with. And we've done that for scientific reasons. We want people to be independent observations. But we ran one study in beginning meditators where after they'd gone through these experiences, we brought them together as groups. And just the level of interaction and the sharing of experiences. And so many of these people had been closed off from being able to talk about these experiences, because if their friends and family have no experiences of this sort, they're they're one of the features is they're ineffable. And so it brings forth a lot of excitement to share that. I would say for me personally, as I started to get re-involved with psychedelics, I found a, a community to discuss that with, to be of real deep value.
Mm,
And there's a sense when people get it, they've come to this deeper understanding of who they are. And I have that sense uh, with you, Tara, and people who have kind of deeply gone into meditation or spiritual practices. There's just a coming together. There's a recognition that comes right forward with that. And there's a sense of intimacy and closeness that come. So yeah, I think as I've become involved with that, I've found a community among people who understand these
mm, mm,
experiences. But it doesn't have to be just psychedelic. It's it's people who are deeply on this path. And there's, I mean, I sometimes describe it as the awakening project. I mean,
mhm,
once you awaken to what this is and the dilemma of the human condition, and you look around and you see all of the suffering, all of these people who are so identified with that narrative structure, and what you want for them is to awaken. And so it's not just through psychedelics, but
of course.
that's the sense of community and passion that comes out of that.
Mm, mm. You know, just to kind of move into this, because I'm really curious. I want to ask you more about how this diagnosis and how really facing the truth of impermanence, how has the awakening through meditation and psychedelics served you in this, including how you're relating to others who are relating to you
Yeah.
as a person who has got a diagnosis. So maybe you could just speak about, what have you discovered as you're facing this chapter of your life? What has psychedelics and meditation taught you?
Yeah. Well, this has been super fascinating to me, unexpected. So it was in November of last year, I went in for a screening colonoscopy, thought myself to be perfectly healthy. I take care of myself. I sleep well. I eat well. And I came out with a colon cancer diagnosis that very quickly was determined to be stage 4 metastatic to liver. And so initially, I mean, this is a profound contemplation about the mortality. And of course, I had done, I thought I had done those those contemplations previously. What choices would you make? Were you told that you had a year to live, or 6 months, or a month, or a week, or a day? Uh, and I found those to be really interesting. But here, all of a sudden, I, I had a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. Initially, the response was just shock, and it felt like a dream. It couldn't be real. And Marla and I spent a couple of days just crying and a little bit disoriented. And then very quickly I started to explore the different psychological outcomes that I might inhabit given this diagnosis. So one night I awoke in the middle of the night and just felt empty. It, Everything seemed so meaningless, and I thought, what is this? So, because of my meditation practice, because of, I think in particular, my meditation practice, there was this self-inquiry that kind of immediately clicked in. And so, what is this? What's going on here? And I thought, geez, if I shared this with my psychiatric colleagues at Johns Hopkins, they'd say, Roland, you're really depressed, And I thought, boy, that's not the place that I want to be. And I woke the next morning with this kind of vivid sense that was a place that I could inhabit, and a recognition that was not a wise place to go. And then I kind of very quickly went through the different kinds of states that one could have. So there could be just terror, there could be depression, could be anger, could be resentment toward medical profession that didn't catch this earlier. There could be fighting the cancer, going to battle with it. And one of my daughters, on the first day of chemo, I sent her a picture from the chemo suite, and she texted me, Dad, kick cancer's ass. and I thought that I loved that she was trying to counsel me, but I thought, I don't want to be at war with anything. That doesn't feel like a good place to be. And being a scientist and a skeptic, I could not take on a protective belief, oh, I'm going to heaven, or this is karma and I'm going to be reincarnated and that's going to be great. I won't rule out all those possibilities, but the prior probability I put on it is diminishingly small. What I recognized is that this was the perfect opportunity just to have gratitude for being alive, for the preciousness of human life, for this experience that we're in. And it's, and that's what practice is, right? I mean, we're practicing being present with reality as it's unfolding. And it just became really clear to me that is the wisest place I could go. I haven't come out with a better one than that. So my practice has been one of gratitude, and it's been astonishing. And I wouldn't have expected this, but there was this sense of absolute joy and love and the ephemeral quality of life, which I had contemplated, but was now forefronted for me, came out just so powerfully. And so it supercharged my interest in leaning in and celebrating life with gratitude. And so I've said, and I mean it, that experience of the diagnosis is one I treat as a blessing, because I've never been happier or more present or had more equipoise than I have since the diagnosis. And that's not to say it's been easy, because I've been through surgeries and chemotherapies that have lots of side effects. I've been physiologically degraded in the process. But just by using each of those challenges actually as a call to be present with whatever it is just it feels just really empowering and lovely. And so I've said on any number of occasions what a tragedy it would have been had I walked out of the house that morning and been run over by a bus, because I thought myself to be awake before, but nothing compared to what I have now. So I literally would not trade this now. Yeah, I'd love to have awakened as I have without a benefit of the stage 4 diagnosis. But it's been astonishing, and I'm humble. I don't know whether I can maintain this sense, and I recognize the challenge of significant chronic pain. That's one of the things that I'm deeply respectful of, and know that, and I don't have that or other things conquered. But what I am emboldened by is this deep desire to just push into whatever it is that emerges. And there's so many opportunities for this. I mean, you get some quote unquote bad news. The tumor markers come up and they've gone way up, or have failed a second course of chemotherapy, and that could be the opportunity for despair. And yet, for me, it's just this opportunity, like, okay, this is real. This is what's real here. What's going on? This is real, and this is life, and I should be celebrating every moment of this. And so it's been wonderful. And then what's come up just recently, and one of the reasons that I'm happy to talk to you about it, is that I think there's something important here. I don't know why I have had this experience. Part of it is certainly based on meditation. Part of it is on psychedelics, and we could talk about where those come into play. But there's something I feel like there's important to say about this and to communicate about this. So up to this point, I have not, as a scientist, ever talked about my own personal psychedelic experiences, and I feel like I don't have room not. I need to be transparent, completely transparent about what I'm going on. It's not. I can't. It's the authenticity that has to be there, and be there fully right now. And there's something to say about that. And I think there's something to be learned about this, and with respect to this larger project of waking up, to whatever extent what I'm going through can be useful to other people, then that's just a wonderful opportunity. So Marla and I continue to, when we talk about this, to invite people in to celebrate this, the wonder of this gift of and preciousness of life and consciousness and reality, hoping that people will use that in just in a prompt to continue to awaken.
So, Roland, here's where I want to pause, because the last few minutes of what you've shared are like, there's nobody that wouldn't have their ears up in some way saying, wow, I wish that when it's my turn, that instead of the depression or the fear, that I could say, oh, that doesn't seem wise. What really would be wise? And in some way land on gratitude, that everything that it's arising right now is an opportunity to deepen presence and to discover more about this mystery. I mean, I can't imagine that would not be the longing. I mean, I feel it in myself. It's like, yes, this would be what I would most wish were mortality closer in. And here's the end. Many people will wonder, how is it possible that there's even a sense of choice to not go into fear or depression or despair? It's like
Yeah.
you had some grace there that you could say, oh, that's not wise. And a lot of people say, whoa, I wish I could say that, but it's not like there's some feeling of choice. So what I want to invite you to do is speak more to how meditation and psychedelics has allowed you to have that freedom to choose gratitude.
Yeah. Well, let's see. So I I don't know. And where I find myself is in a place that I had never imagined or contemplated previously. So it's just happened. But as I think about it, there are two pieces to that. One is certainly the foundation of meditation and understanding that, as we talked about, that feelings and thoughts are appearances, are objects that come into consciousness, and recognizing the ephemeral qualities of those, and recognizing that you don't have to attach to those, uh, and that's what meditation is, isn't it? I mean, we go in with an object of focus, and we recognize ourselves being pulled away into the narrative stream, and then we're constantly bringing ourselves back to that. And so one of the transformative pieces of meditation was when I initially started practicing that is de-identifying from that voice in my head, and recognizing that I didn't need to follow that. I remember very early on with meditation, well, I guess I'd gotten fairly involved, but then I started paying attention to that voice in my head for maybe the first time, and being kind of shocked about about the narrative of what it was saying, the kind of the judgment, the self-judgment, or judgment of other people, and how embarrassing it would be if brain went on loudspeaker, and this and the nasty things that it had to say about me, and and then starting to see, well, that's just his voice, and thank you very much, but I don't need that advice, and so learning to catch oneself when things like that arise has been really important. So that's foundational. But then I think psychedelics have empowered that, because it is mind on steroids. Things come up so forcefully in the field of consciousness, and they feel so overwhelming. And I think what I've learned from psychedelics is that is to navigate past experiences that could be, just dark rabbit holes of discomfort. Now there can be value in insights that come out of having experiences that are unpleasant. So the idea is not to completely push them away, but to recognize them as they come up. And so that's basically been my experience. It's almost like I can see things really clearly with respect to attitudes or feelings that I just don't want to hold on to. I don't want them to have any any power, and just recognizing, oh, that's fear, or that's resentment, and then just defaulting to, but wait, this is occurring. You're awake, you're alive, you have this opportunity. Why would you want to go there? And so I felt myself to be aware that, partly awake, but but not to have that down in a sense that I could have imagined it's emerged since the diagnosis. So I don't know, but that explanatory kind of concept makes sense.
It does. And it, in a way, it's a tribute to what mystics have said through centuries and centuries, that if we deepen attention, we can unhook.
Yeah.
We can unhook. We do not have to be, it's like that message, don't believe your thoughts, and don't believe your thoughts, and don't believe your thoughts. It's like we actually can go with that. And what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is just bounce with you a parallel experience I had not that long ago, that I've had in meditation many, many rounds through my life. And that was, like you described, it was kind of supercharged on a psilocybin journey that was just some months ago. And it was, it's like I could feel how my daily life had distracted me from the radicalness of impermanence. So as soon as the psilocybin took effect, it was radical impermanence. It was clear that everything was coming and going, including this body and all beings that I love. And, I had my dog nearby who died a bit afterwards, and was feeling the vulnerability of my aging body. And so it wasn't an idea of mortality. It was my cells knew the reality of, and with that fear, the fear came up, deep reflexive fear of resisting, of not liking, of unpleasant. And then, as you describe, a kind of leaning in, or I think of it almost like this, like surrendering, letting the fear be completely there without any resistance, and it became grief. It was like just the sheer sadness or sorrow of cherishing and losing, cherishing and losing. And that, when I surrendered into it, became this portal to just absolutely cherishing the changing appearances of life. It was a cherishing. And there was a profound shift in identity, that I was no longer the fearful self for the body that was going, that I was this timeless presence that was witnessing and experiencing everything with a profound love. And what I have found, Roland, is that comes a lot. And the more I get familiar with timeless presence, this field that is looking through these eyes at each other, the tenderness that's inherent to that field, the more that I become familiar with it, the more it's absolutely a truth beyond any story about myself. And the more I trust that, the more I'm fearless. And I wanted to share with you a quote that I keep going back to that has to do with this, which is that if everything changes, then what is really true? Is there something behind the appearances, something boundless and infinitely spacious, innately loving, in which the dance of change and impermanence takes place? Is there something, in fact, we can depend on that can survive what we call death? And I want to share this because as I listen to you, it feels like it's a tribute to how there's been that learning on how to unhook, to let go of the identity with the changing thought, body, feeling, and arresting in something larger, and that you trust that.
Mm.
There's a trust that makes it possible for you to actually not go down the wormholes of getting identified with depression and fear.
Yeah.
And that to me is something that's possible for all of us. And it takes practice. And for many, the benefits of psychedelics will deepen that. Does that resonate for you?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it certainly does. So yeah, one comment is, so we the first therapeutic study I conducted was in, ironically enough, cancer patients who were depressed and anxious for their diagnosis. And I think palliative care and end of life is a very great target for psychedelics. But out of that study and other studies that we've done, it's very common for people after these deeper psychedelic experiences to come out with some thought of something surviving death, that there's, whether it's consciousness or something else. So that's really quite common. It's common in near-death experiences, and it's common in psychedelic experiences in which people feel that they've had some kind of altered understanding or beliefs about the nature of death. For me, I mean, that again, this is my skepticism. I can't know that to be true, and I can't take that on with any certainty. But I can affirm that it's actually very common that people have those experiences. But that, one of the interesting things, you don't need a high probability of that outcome to make the process of dying to be one of deep curiosity, right? I mean, we don't know what happens when we die, and isn't it going to be interesting?
Well, in a way, I feel like we die. Dying happens throughout our life.
Yeah.
And then there's the question of who dies. Because I think if you really think you're what's dying, there's too much fear to be curious.
Yeah.
And so my sense is, and it doesn't matter to me too much, the thing about, does something survive beyond death? What really matters is a sense of the what we are that's larger than this changing body and mind.
Mm-hmm.
There's a resting in something larger.
Yeah. Yeah. I have another reflection on my psychedelic experiences. So I certainly have not been immune to fearful experiences. And what I've found that the way that I have managed these experiences is when this kind of deep foreboding fearfulness comes up, my immediate impulse is actually to go deeply into that. And if I'm in a place that I'm ambulatory, and if it's under conditions where I'm with other people, and I don't, and now I'm giving advice that I wouldn't recommend for people to do, but I'll go off alone, and with the thought that I'm going off into this place that I don't understand. There's some foreboding there. There's something fearful there. Some sense that I'm walking toward my own death. And then when I get deeply quiet with that, and then the inquiry is, okay, so where do I find myself? And what I'm aware of is this energetic feeling, and somehow my mind has turned it into fear. But as I really explore that, it's like, well, no, that's one label you could put on this, but there's this energy.
Mm.
There's incredible energy that I'm feeling, and what is that? And then very often I'll open my eyes, and fortunately I'm very often in a nature situation, and I'm just overwhelmed with the beauty and the
Mm.
appreciation.
Mm.
And the sense is that this is the energy of awakening, and it's manifesting, and this is such a gift. And then what was experienced as fear is just felt to be this huge outpouring of gratitude and celebration, that uh, that I feel I really need to share with people. And so I think that's part of what has come up for me, that the way to go into some of the darkest feelings, and and recog- recognize that it's just an opportunity. If you just lean into the present moment and ask what's real, there, there's nothing but gratitude and celebration that comes out of that.
That totally resonates. In a way, we're circling to the teaching right from the start of when it's intense. If you don't resist, if you don't push away, just being with, in it enlarges the presence that's here. So there's room for what's there, and you can relate with that gratitude,
Yeah.
which is just so beautiful. And so a question for you, because of what you described about your own way of kind of going off on your own. You've guided lots and lots of people now. And how many would you guesstimate you guided on journeys?
Let's see. Well, I've been with hundreds,
Hundreds.
but not all of those are in the session room. So I've
Right.
spent a lot of time before and after sessions. I'll very often go into session room immediately after the session.
So, and part of my curiosity is, what is it like for you as a guide to bear witness to people? And I want to say, where the reason I'm asking is because just hearing from Jonathan, his process of going in deep and getting into something that was difficult and painful, and having you and the other facilitator, your presence, and having it be so utterly kind and so close in, was a part of the field that helped him to open larger. And I just wonder what it's like for you to be able to hold a space for people in that incredibly intimate way.
Yeah. Let's see. So, in different guides would handle this differently. But I mean, for me, it's an opportunity to go into meditation.
Mm.
And then there is some sense I have, I don't know what to make of it, about entering into a shared space
Mm.
in the field of consciousness. And I don't know if that's imaginary or not. I certainly have had very powerful experiences of that. I certainly I think that's one of the benefits of group retreats, because there's something that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's so the opportunity to guide and to be present is like a many day long retreat
Mm.
in
Mm.
many cases. But then if someone is struggling, then this is the opportunity to practice compassion
Yeah.
and love, and and that's lovely too.
Mm.
So there's something very uplifting about having the privilege to sit with people.
Mm. Well, the compassion and love was certainly felt. And this is a little bit of a segue, because I do believe that the meditations, the psychedelics, it wakes us up in a way that compassion and love flow more freely. And you have a vision, really to do with our larger society that I want to just invite you to share a bit of how psychedelics, uh, my language is, it can just serve our collective evolution. So I just hope you'll share the vision and also share a bit about the endowment, because I feel like it's such an exciting possibility.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. So, so the diagnosis has opened so many wonderful opportunities and doors for me, and a number of them came directly out of writing my will. And in this case, it came to the point of charitable contributions. And this is a couple months after the diagnosis. And my initial thought was, okay, what I've been doing in recent years is making charitable contributions to Give Well. It's part of the effective altruism movement, and they really vet charities. And I thought, this is easy, I'll just do that. And then I woke the next morning and thought, what is it that I really would like to give? And as I thought about that, it's the very thing that I've been longing for myself and others. It's what brought me into meditation, and it's what has empowered my interest in the work with psychedelics. It's, what I really want is contributing to the awakening of humankind. That we're all in this together, that we need to take care of one another, that we need to take care of this planet that we're in, and that there's something incredibly beautiful about that. And of course, what I do is science. I'm a researcher, and I'm committed to the scientific method as being the most powerful tool we have to unpack reality, and we're far from having done that. But there's no reason that the tools of science can't focus in on the awakening experience. And with psychedelics, we have the most powerful scientific tool that's ever become available to study that. And that's the very nature of what we've been doing. Our research to date has been primarily focused on therapeutic outcomes, and that's just pragmatic. That's the funding is there for therapeutic outcomes. There's cultural acceptance of that. But what I think is the much bigger and more important project is, what are the implications for these kinds of experiences for otherwise healthy people, or people who don't carry a diagnosis in any case. And I think it's so important because if we can truly understand the nature of what creates this sense that we're all in this together, the pro-social aspects that come out of that we need to take care of one another. There's this deep ethical implication that arises from that. And it really boils down to the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And we need that. And now I'll talk very broadly about how do we manifest that? We need to understand the process and then develop cultural institutions that can effectively bring our culture and society into wise use of these compounds. And we need to evolve a set of ethics that go beyond simple the divisiveness of religious teachings. And so that's it. There's this idea of that science can move forward this project of understanding, awakening, and then eventually the hope is, and this is multi-generational, the hope is that this then gets seeded into culture, and it actually has to go worldwide for this to work. But the importance of it is no less, in my opinion, the survival of our species. That right now, and it's science that has created some of the risks to this, is we have a number of technologies that are existential in terms of their threat. I mean, that could be bioweaponry or nuclear weapons or climate change or AI risk, and there'll be others. And yet our ethical and our moral and our religious teachings are pretty primitive right now, and they're divisive, and they actually increase the chances that these existential technologies may be used against us. And so that's what this project is about. It's to advance research on this very topic we've been talking about, Tara. And that's how do we awaken people and culture? What's the nature of these experiences? How do we optimize what creates that? What vulnerabilities are there? What genetic factors are there? How do we sustain those? And I think that's very, very important, because there's a lot to do to integrate these experiences into the human condition. So my initial thought was, okay, that's what I want, and I don't have a big estate, so maybe I could put together a small endowment and endow a research lecture at Hopkins on what I call psychedelic research into secular spirituality and well-being. And then I thought, I might have some goodwill in the community to reach further if I created a professorship and a research fund. And so that's this vision that's come out of this. So we've established an endowment at Hopkins, and I'm shooting for $20 million, but every $25 is deeply appreciated. And we've established this endowment that creates a professorship, so that someone is appointed, and they never have to worry about their salary. They're focused in on the intent and purpose of this, and that's to understand these deeper principles of awakening. And it also creates a research fund, which will pay for some of this research going on. And research for psychedelics is really quite expensive. And when it's in an endowment, it's generating only a portion of that, because the endowment is managed in perpetuity, that is forever, as long as Johns Hopkins exists as an institution. And so this is really near and dear to my heart, because it carries forward exactly what we've been talking about, Tara.
Yeah.
The vision is that science has something deeply important to say about this, but it's creating an engine to conduct this kind of research in perpetuity, forever. And the interesting thing is that I don't think the answer, we may never have the complete answer to the question, but there's so little we understand about the nature of consciousness, the nature of these experiences, the nature of what this project is that we're in. And I'm not sure there's going to be a single answer. So in perpetuity sounds really, really good to me.
Yeah, it's a nice word. It rolls off the mouth right, perpetuity. I just want to say, because I am certainly contributing myself, that I think that there's all sorts of good efforts for transformation going on around the globe, and that nothing will work if we don't evolve our consciousness. Everything comes out of consciousness, and consciousness is evolving, and we have to facilitate it. I mean, the forces that are bringing us down of unprocessed fear and bad othering are so strong, and the more stressed we are by a climate that is causing catastrophes, the stronger those energies get. So we really need to very intentionally facilitate consciousness, and I look at this as one of the pathways that has unbelievable promise. So I just want to encourage anybody who's listening to just consider the implications. I mean, it's the science, but then of course it'll have to partner with all these other institutions in our society to make available, in a way that doesn't privilege some people over others, this extraordinary way of kind of fast starting, or kind of booting up our systems to really wake up. So and we will be posting with this talk a link that'll give you all the information you need. But I interrupted you, Roland, so anything else you wanted to say on it, please?
Oh, well, let me just say that the link is griffithsfund.org. So it's GRIFFITHS fund, one word, .org. Thank you for that. I mean, in the direction this research, it's going to go in many different directions, but one of the directions will certainly be this: how do we facilitate maximum outcome out of these experiences? And the marriage here of meditation and mindfulness practice with these has to be, a central focus to that.
Yeah. No, it's, many of us are putting our lives into kind of, can we help more and more people to use meditation to wake up their hearts and minds? And this goes absolutely hand in hand. Now, the last thing I want to ask is, I know for myself that I've developed this thing when I give a talk, and I'll say to myself, well, if this was the last talk I was going to ever give, what would it matter most for me to say? I might have already said it, but what would be the real kind of gist of what I'd want to offer to others? And I'm just wondering if I say that to you again, just to send some of, because we've covered a lot, what is it that most matters, that you most want to leave people with?
Well, thank you. Well, it's exactly what we've been talking about. What I want for myself and others is to awaken to this incredible miracle. Is not too strong a word that we find ourselves in. That we're these highly evolved sentient creatures that can feel and touch and walk the earth, and we've developed communication and we've developed science, but we've come to recognize that we're aware, that we're in the middle of this incredible mystery that science doesn't even begin to understand. And we do not have any understanding about the nature of consciousness, nor do we have a coherent physics. And so so it's an invitation to celebrate, and that's what I've said to people out of this diagnosis. But it flows from everything that we've talked about. Is let's celebrate, lean into this moment for the gratitude of being awake. So, thank you.
Well, in that spirit, my friend, so much gratitude to be able to celebrate with you in this way. Blessings. And thank you, friends, for joining us. This is one you may want to listen to a number of times. I'm really, really grateful for your attention and presence.